Hey, it's the Genesee County Compassion Club show. I'm your host, Jeremy, back in the studio here at allpointstv.com. Got John hanging out with me, making it happen here. I definitely appreciate that, John. How's it going today?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good. Another day of shoveling, another day of snow. It's February 27th. Still winter. I think the groundhog lied.
I'm looking for him, yeah.
Yeah.
I want my money back.
Exactly. Club him on the head. Fake news.
He joined the club.
Yeah. All right, well, hey, I'm glad to have you guys with me this week. I want to share with you information, let you know what's happening down at the Genesee County Compassion Club, let you guys know what our events that are coming up, and hit you with the news. All right, so let's get it on. Let's get started. Today, like I said, it's February 27th, Wednesday, and a week from today is the club's 10-year anniversary, folks. 10 years. 10 years of the club. I don't know if there's anybody else there in Michigan that can say that right now. That's 10 years on the books, 10 years filed with the state. 10 years of the Genesee County Compassion Club. I'm so excited to be able to say that, to still be here, still be a part of it, still have it going on. It's fantastic. A decade, guys, a decade.
You're the biggest club in Michigan, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so, without a doubt.
What's the current membership level on?
I think we're over 35,000 members.
Holy crap.
I don't have the exact count on it. You guys, I know you guys do there at the club, but I know we were over 35 not that long ago. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's freaking huge. It's badass. You guys make it happen, though. That's the key, and I thank you so much for doing it. 10 years of making it happen. You definitely deserve to be commended, and so we're going to have a party for you guys, all right? So next week, Wednesday, club party. Make it happen. Be there. It's going to be awesome. It's a prelude to our 420, and it's a celebration, like I said, of 10 years of the Genesee County Compassion Club and medical marijuana here in Michigan. We filed as a nonprofit back in March 2009, so there you go, 10 years. And like I said, I don't think there's anybody else out there in Michigan that can make that claim, make that statement. We're the oldest, we're the biggest, and you guys are the best, period. Awesome stuff. So make it happen next week. Get down to the club if you're not there already. It's going to be an awesome day. We're going to have lots of fun activities and just celebrate goodness and wonderfulness of marijuana. You know what I'm saying? And speaking of 420, of course, we do have our 420 party coming up in April 20th, obviously. We're going to have just recently booked Reverend Right Time. There's going to be, which is awesome. I'm excited to have him there at the club finally. And there's going to be a couple other bands, to my understanding. We're going to have some circus acts like jugglers and whatnot. It's going to be a fun party. We're switching it up definitely from the previous years, so it's not going to be the same old. We're going with some new, fun, exciting things. And I'm looking forward to that big time. So mark your calendars, April 20th. I'm sure you probably already have that day marked down. It's pretty much a national holiday at this point. I mean, yeah, it's bigger. It's bigger than some of the national holidays.
I think you guys got a lot to take pride in. I mean, you really do. I mean,
I'm so thankful.
10 years. I mean, it's
so thankful
that numbers.
Still be here. You know, being in Genesee County has been a blessing as well. If we had, tried to exist in other places around Michigan, I'd probably be in jail. You know what I mean? It's just we had good communication with leadership in this county. Good direction from them, and good cooperation on our end, of course, to make sure we're sticking with our end of the bargain, living up to the obligations of the law, knowing what our rules are, sticking with them. And it's not always fun, but, we're here, and we're here because of that. So, yeah, I think there are some good things to be happy with, and I couldn't be more pleased, really. I think it's fantastic. So, other events coming up, I want to make mention, March 19th, we got our soup kitchen. Make sure you come out for that. We definitely need some help. I know it's a ways off in the distance, but if you can mark your calendar, put it down, hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer by then. You guys can get out a little spring air maybe, but we certainly could use your help. So I know that we had Matt, I talked to him last week. He said they had like over 120 people get served at the soup kitchen this last time here in February. So that's a big turnout. We definitely need help with that. And thank you so much for Matt and for everybody else who showed up this last month. You guys did a great job. I know you served up some coney dogs. People loved it. And, hey, this is Flint. People love coney dogs. You know what I'm saying? It's like a national heritage. All right. Those are the events that we got coming up here. I'm super stoked about them, and I can't wait to see you guys there. Looking forward to it. And hopefully we'll have some better weather. But even if we don't, it'll be warm and toasty in the club. You know that. We'll keep those fires burning, all right? So I got some news I want to share with you guys, let you guys get up to date on marijuana. So let's get it on, all right? First off, I want to talk about, we've been talking about this on the podcast. We're going to continue talking about it until all 50 states are legalized, all right? And it hasn't happened yet. There's still quite a boatload out there that this needs to occur. Still many states out there that do not have medical marijuana yet. Thankfully, it's the minority at this point. But there's still quite a few places out there. And we take it for granted now that we've had 10 years of medical marijuana in Michigan, of being able to have access to this as an alternative medication. And there's places all around the country right now where you still don't have access. People are still being treated as criminals for choosing this. And that's just preposterous. So I did want to bring up, because this article was just recently came out in Forbes, and it's mentioning a few of the states that we may see legalization in this year. So obviously last year we were one of the states that legalized it, and we're not the only ones, obviously. So coming up in the near future, here's some states, and here's a little bit of backdrop on them. So we've got New Mexico. Their House and Senate committees have approved 2 different legal marijuana bills in the recent weeks. A separate Senate bill would legalize marijuana but allow it to be sold only in state-run stores. That was approved by a chamber last week. The governor, Michelle Grisham, she supports legalization, says she will sign a bill into law as long as it contained adequate protections for public health and safety. So looks like New Mexico is on their way to getting this done. They've got a couple bills that they're working on. Probably just need a little bit of compromise to get the final package out the door. And we'll see how it goes. I'm a little disappointed that they're running with state-run stores. But at any rate, it's better to have access than not at all. That's for certain. Next state up is New Hampshire. New Hampshire, the House Criminal Justice Public Safety Committee acted last week to advance a marijuana legalization bill. A floor vote before the full House is scheduled for today. The governor said he would veto any cannabis legalization bill that reaches his desk, but the House Speaker believes that they have enough votes in the chamber to perhaps override any veto, and they feel the same way about the Senate as well. So, New Hampshire, I think that's kind of interesting. Why New Hampshire has medical marijuana? Why aren't they moving on here? But at any rate, and why is their governor going against what the entire legislative body is saying needs to happen, or what the public is saying needs to happen? Who knows? But at any rate, Chris Sununu, I'm not sure if that's how you say his name, Republican governor for New Hampshire. Pull your head out of your rectum, sir. All right, New Hampshire might be the next state. Next state up is Hawaii. Their Senate Judiciary Committee unanimously voted to approve cannabis legalization bill on February 7th. The floor action hasn't been scheduled yet. Says here the body's president said in a speech at the start of the legislative session that considering ending marijuana prohibition would be a priority for 2019. So Hawaii looks like they're well on their way. Their governor is not especially supportive, so says the article. However, says advocates aren't sure that he would sign a full legalization bill if it reaches his desk. That said, lawmakers are also advancing more modest legislation to simply decriminalize possession of small amounts of cannabis in hopes that the governor would be more supportive. So, at any rate, once again, governor standing in the way of safety, not willing to really, do some research, maybe figure out how this is being a positive force in other states that have legalized it. Maybe he should look around. All right, get outside of Hawaii. Although, if I lived in Hawaii, I'd have a tough time getting outside of Hawaii. I can't blame them there. All right, and next state, Vermont. Vermont lawmakers already legalized low-level possession and home cultivation of cannabis last year. The Senate Judiciary, Finance, and Appropriations Committee all voted this month to approve a bill to add in a system of legal marijuana sales as well. A floor vote in the full Senate, which has on several occasions in the past sessions already approved similar bills and is expected on Thursday. Their governor, Phil Scott, who signed Vermont's existing non-commercial legalization policy into law, says he's reluctant to go further until the state has better technology to detect impaired driving. But with such strong support in the legislature, where half of the Senate and more than a third of the House have proactively signed on as co-sponsors of the bills, a veto override is not out of the question. Nor is the notion that Scott could feel sufficient pressure to let the measure go into law without vetoing it in the first place. So I guess we'll have to see what the governor does there as well. Looks like their legislative body in Vermont is definitely on board, and hopefully we'll be seeing some action there soon. So there's 5 states right there: New Mexico, New Hampshire, Vermont, Hawaii. And the fifth state I'm going to mention is Florida. It's actually not in the article, but it was actually in the news today. Florida has medical marijuana. It's very limited, very difficult. They just recently expanded the program, so now you can actually get flower instead of just other edibles. And now they're looking at legalization on top of this. So a Central Florida lawmaker, one of two Democrats, who has introduced legislation aimed at legalizing recreational marijuana in Florida. Let's see here. House Bill 1117 would legalize recreational marijuana in Florida. It says here they also introduced House Bill 1119, which would impose an excise tax on the marijuana. So, Florida, even though it being a hotbed of conservatancy, looks like they want to get some marijuana in their hands too. So that's good stuff. All right, next state I want to talk about, Indiana. Indiana, kind of an interesting story there. They have medical marijuana. It's incredibly limited. It's all state approved, state run agencies. So not a whole lot of access happening in Indiana. Meantime, their governor, and this was from the Indy Star today, you can check this out, says he admits to smoking marijuana. Says he's smoked it in the past, but yet he still doesn't support legalization. So there you go. This Governor Holcomb, governor of Indiana, pretty clearly a hypocrite. You know, some point in his life he felt it was okay for him to do so, but he feels it's okay right now at this point to put people in jail for doing the same thing that he did. And that's ridiculous. You know, and that's unfortunately the type of bullheadedness that we see in our politics nowadays. So, you know, it's okay for them to do it, but no. And not only can you not do it, but I'll put you in jail if you do. Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
Kamala Harris they pointed out she prosecuted people for weed, and she, in a recent interview, said that she had smoked weed and listened to Tupac and Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
Well, even though the timelines totally doesn't mesh because they came out much later after her. She was already out of college, but yeah, she already admitted that, and she had prosecuted people for doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I get sick of that too when I hear that. I've seen that. I've seen friends. I have people around me who've done that too. You know, so I think it's really hypocritical, really.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, hopefully Indiana could have a change of heart somewhere along the lines. It says, trying to get here, their Representative Jim Lucas filed House Bill 1283 to decriminalize possession of low levels of weed and House Bill 1384 to allow for medical marijuana use, but neither bill received a hearing. Lucas has been vocal about his desire to legalize marijuana in Indiana, and during testimony at a legislative study committee last fall, Lucas said he tried as much marijuana as he could in Colorado to see if it was dangerous, and his comment was that he had the best night's sleep he has ever had. So when jokingly asked about Lucas at the Wednesday press conference, the governor said he wasn't as happy as he is. So, you know, and that's more that hypocrisy we're talking about. Here the governor's cracking jokes about his marijuana laws, but at the same time, people are going to jail for this. It's no joking matter. So, Mr. Holcomb, please remove head from rectum, move forward. All right? Okay, I got some science I want to share with you guys. Getting away from the states. That's it for states news today. That's enough. I thought this was an interesting article, and you can check this out on ScienceDaily.com. I'm just waiting for it to pull up here. This was from the University of California, Berkeley, and the title of the article is that yeast can produce low-cost, high-quality cannabinoids. This is kind of interesting, so let's get into this. It says here at the University of California, Berkeley, synthetic biologist. First of all, are they real biologists or are they synthetic? Anyways, synthetic biologists have created an enzymatic network in yeast that turns sugar into cannabinoids, including tetrahydrocannabinol, cannabidiol, and also novel cannabinoids not found in the marijuana plant itself. The yeast factories would be more environmentally friendly and less energy intensive than growing the plant, and separating out the psychoactive and non-psychoactive ingredients, they may also yield cannabinoid derivatives with unexpected medical uses. So kind of a short story there, a little synopsis of their study, but I thought that was interesting and worth sharing. And I also have been waiting to see something like this, I guess, because cannabinoids, obviously we sort of assign them and their origins to the plant cannabis seems to make sense there. But the actual chemical properties, the actual cannabinoids that we're talking about, I've always wondered, could they be created from another source? And I'm not talking about synthetic, even though that these are synthetic biologists in a sense. But yeah, I mean, here they go. They did it. They're using yeast. It turns sugar into cannabinoids, and they're able, obviously, to get a bunch of different types of cannabinoids, THC, CBD included. So pretty interesting study. And that's more proof right there that there are all kinds of studies going on about cannabis and cannabinoids in this country currently, in spite of our drug scheduling, which says that you're not supposed to be able to do research, blah blah blah. Clearly, our universities around the country have been able to figure out a way to study this subject matter without actually getting in trouble for it, so to speak. So it's a good thing. But I think we need to shed more light on this, that when people say, oh, there's not enough research about cannabis, blah blah blah, there's a ton of research out there. You just have to dig for it, do a little bit of research yourself, and you'll find everything it is you're looking for. There's an abundance of information out there. So all right, before I get into this last story, I got one more I want to talk to you about, and this is Ohio. So go back to the states for a second. For those of you that are not aware, Ohio does have medical marijuana. It is a very strict program. And if I can find the doggone article here. Just waiting for it to pull up here. My apologies. But while I'm waiting for this, I'll get to the gist of the story. Essentially, because the marijuana, the medical marijuana in Ohio is so highly regulated, with fees, registrations, applications, so on and so forth. Not as bad as Michigan, but pretty bad. I mean, I'm sorry, other way around. Michigan's a little better than Ohio when it comes to this. But no, they have an incredible amount of red tape, bureaucracy, so on, that you have to go through in order to get into the program, to be a producer, so on and so forth. Incredibly difficult. And consequently, what's happening is that the supply to the patients, of who this was all for in the first place, it's extremely limited. And of course, as you well know, comes to economics, when you have limited supply of something and high demand, the price is high as well. And that's what's happening in Ohio. In fact, right now, the average price for medical marijuana in Ohio is recorded as high as being $480, and even higher in some cases. So this is quite a bit above normal market rate for what you see for cannabis prices across the country. And you can look at any one of your local cannabis mags and get an idea of what the ballparks are. But the average dollar amount right now for cannabis ounce prices across the country are anywhere from $100 an ounce, and in Ohio, obviously, up to almost $500 an ounce. So there's quite a range there, but the average medium amount is somewhere around $200 to $250. So, and this is before taxes and all the other things as well. And I know that there's people out there that'll say that's not true, but this is before you get to paying all them fees, so on and so forth. But at any rate, I mean, that's considerable. It's almost twice the amount of what the average cost is to patients. And it's unfortunate that people in Ohio that are using this for medicinal purposes are being raked over the coals, to feed the bureaucracy, to feed the state, to feed the government. And that's not what this is for. It's medical marijuana. These people should be getting this at the lowest cost possible. Many of the people who do receive this medication are disabled and on disability, i.e. fixed incomes, and they don't have the extra cash to spend on alternative medications in the first place, let alone one that's incredibly overpriced. And stuff like this is anti-establishment, meaning like if the government set this program up to provide this for patients and they want it to be a successful program, they have to understand that the price of it is going to help dictate the availability. So in other words, there's obviously a black market that goes on across the country in marijuana, no matter where you look. If the black market prices are considerably less than what your regulated price is, well, guess what? People aren't going to go to your regulated market. Okay? They might pay an extra $20, $30 to know that they're going to be safe and legal, but when you ask them to pay twice or three times as much, most people are going to turn the other way and find the alternative. And that's what's happening. So I think that's something that we could take a look at in Ohio, do the same correlation here in Michigan, and talk about that. And that's going to lead me into the next article, actually. So we've been talking quite a bit about recalls, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. There have been more recalls since last week's show. And we're of course talking about recalls on medical marijuana. hype right now in the media is that all of this marijuana is from caregivers and it's tainted because caregivers are somehow inferior to the growing process. But let me remind you folks out there, caregivers have been the ones that have provided 99% of the cannabis out there in Michigan for the past 10 years. There's been very few cases cited that anyone has become sick, ill, or died because of bad practices from caregivers. We know that no one's ever died from marijuana use itself, but we're talking about contaminants, pathogens, things like mold, maybe chemical residue. In some cases, we're seeing things like heavy metals be present. So obviously those things there can and will affect people's health, and we don't want to see that happening. But at the same time, we don't need the hype that somehow caregivers are now inferior or unable to provide their services because they're not a licensed facility. And this type of thing is just nonsense. There's a newly formed trade association. I talked a little bit about this last podcast. I want to bring it up again because you guys need to know who your enemies are, and these guys are your enemies. It is the Great Lakes Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, formed late last year by a group of Lansing lobbyists, and this is from the City Pulse, Lansing City Pulse, that I'm reading this. Statewide efforts to unkink the medical marijuana supply chain that has led to untrained or unlicensed growers manipulating the medicine with harmful and dangerous additives, according to a recent press release. It says here, people need to access medicine and that medicine should not be tainted, said the spokesman, Matt Miner. The supply needs to be there. We just like to make sure that it's not harmful for patients, and what caregivers are providing doesn't compare to licensed facilities out there. That's what he says. Says this year, Michigan's Department of LARA has issued 6 voluntary recalls. This is as of the date of the article, which is a little bit dated now at this point, February 25th. Issued 6 voluntary recalls for several particular strains of medical marijuana that failed state-mandated testing procedures, traces of chemical and bacterial residue, high moisture content, and other similar violations have been reported throughout the state. Homegrown was the only licensed dispensary in Lansing to be targeted for recall. More than 100 customers bought a range of contaminated bud there late last year. Says here, they since have been made eligible for a full refund. Other dispensaries in Kalamazoo, Vassar, Ypsilanti, and Detroit have since issued similar recalls. Although no patients have reported any negative side effects to state officials, the most recent recall effort seems to have sparked more vocal concerns within the industry. It says here, strains of green crack and sugar black rose sold at the patient station in Ypsilanti tested positive for arsenic and cadmium residues in February. But I'm not going to get into that. It says, one of the major goals of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facility and Licensing Act was patient safety. This is from Mike Calton, former state representative who co-authored the legislation. The state cannot continue to allow arsenic and other harmful substances to taint medicine being sold in Michigan. Miner is only moonlighting as the Cannabis Chamber spokesman. He is also the CEO at a multi-client lobbying firm, Capital Strategies Group, who served as the chief of staff for then Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop. Bishop, for added context, opposed last year's ballot initiative to legalize recreational marijuana. The problem for us is there are a lot of problems with the caregiver supply out there, Miner said. In an effort to avoid having these problems tainted, we're looking at what steps can be taken to completely get that out of the picture. Caregivers should continue those relationships with patients, just not in a regulated dispensary setting. This is what the guy is saying from his trade association, okay? Prior restrictions effectively banned licensed shops from stocking their shelves with caregiver-grown marijuana. The limited number of licensed growers statewide, a statewide supply shortage, forced many disclosures or dispensaries to close. Those rules were overturned earlier this year amid an attempt to bolster patient access across the state. Cardholders instead now only need to sign a waiver acknowledging that their medical bud hasn't necessarily been tested in full compliance with the law. On April 1st, however, those restrictions are scheduled to go back into effect and would again require licensed dispensaries to stock their inventories with fully tested products. By then, the state officials hope the market will have adequately expanded to meet statewide demand. But LARA has repeatedly folded to industry pressures and extended deadlines on medical marijuana operations. Miner and his colleagues are concerned that untested marijuana might still find its way onto the market. His hopes are that they adhere to the deadline, and if there is an issue at the end of the March, there needs to be some type of continuation there. He says he'd like to be a part of that conversation. Well, anyways, Cannabis Chamber of Commerce was registered as a nonprofit by Minor, Nathaniel Love, and Rob L. Hennicky, who also works there as a lobbyist. He previously helped represent the Michigan Wine Producers Association. All right. Let's talk about this a little bit. This is a industry-created trade organization. Again, Great Lakes Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. It does not represent patients. It does not certainly represent caregivers. It is basically formed of people that are participating in the Licensed Facilities Act. And certainly right now their main concern is their business. It's not patients. It's continuation of their business. It's making sure that their businesses are profitable. And I have seen businesses already state that their dispensaries are not becoming profitable. And they're somehow stating that it's the caregiver's fault somehow. I would 100% disagree with that. I think the caregivers are currently supplying a product to dispensaries, and in most cases, the cost of that product is lower than what these facilities will be providing. So we're going to see the cost going up. In some cases, we may see the quality going down. And at any rate, everything is still going to be tested. I would think if this so-called group that's looking out for patients really has patients' interest in mind, they would be more concerned with the process of testing and distributing than they would be with caregivers. And what I mean by that is if these products are being tested, and obviously they are, they had to fail a test, so they were tested, right? If they're tested, then why are they even on the shelf prior to knowing what the test results are? Why aren't they addressing that particular process in their timeline? That makes no sense. So we're going to go ahead and sell products out to people before we know what the results are on the test. We'll get the results in 2 weeks after all the product's gone, and then we'll call everybody back and tell them, hey, sorry, the product that you took that you probably already used has failed its test. And in some cases, it's got terrible stuff in there, like arsenic. Who wants to get that phone call? Well, I could give you a refund. That's what the dispensaries are saying. But what are you going to do? Give them a refund on life? That's ridiculous. So, and these problems are not solely contained to the caregiver industry. There were recalls that were happening long before caregivers were allowed to take their medicine to dispensaries, and the recalls that were issued were on products that were created at the licensed facilities. So there's no guarantee that just because your stuff is licensed that it isn't going to have some type of contaminated product with it. There's no guarantee on that unless they change the process. And it's just flooring to me that this committee wouldn't even bring that up, wouldn't even talk about it. But they sure go after caregivers, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to attack caregivers. And listen to what he said right here. Let me read this to you again. People need access to medicine, but that medicine should not be tainted. The supply needs to be there. We just like to make sure that it's not harmful for patients. And what caregivers are providing out there doesn't compare to licensed facilities out there. Well, that's a 100% lie. It's not true at all. And this Mr. Minor has no idea what he's talking about. All right. Listen to what he also says here too. I want to point this out as well, because I thought I always think the devil's in the details, and I think this is no case here. It says here they have, trying to find the verbiage here. I need to be there. All right, here we go. It says the problem for us is this is again from the trade association, Mr. Minor speaking, in quotation, the problem for us is there are a lot of problems with the caregiver supply out there. How would he know? In an effort to avoid having these products tainted, we're looking at what steps can be taken to completely get that out of the picture. And read that to you again. This is a lobbyist firm, essentially, okay? They're calling themselves a trade organization, but they're made up of a bunch of lobbyists, okay? And what they just said is in an effort to avoid having these problems or these products tainted, we're looking at what steps can be taken to completely get that out of the picture. And then his next comment is caregivers should continue those relationships with patients, just not in a regulated dispensary setting. Well, that's what Mr. Miner says. So at any rate, like I started off saying, you need to know who your enemies are. This guy is your enemy if you are a regular caregiver out there. He's no friend to you. And I don't think he's really looking out for patients either, because as I already previously stated, if he really was, he could look at the process and how these medicines are getting to the patient and correct the process. All right? It wouldn't take that long. I know how long it takes to test medicine. It's not a long period of time, per se, to where they couldn't just simply hold that supply until they get the results. Once they get the results, if it's good, put it on the shelf. That's what he should be asking for. But he's not asking for that. He's attacking caregivers. So caregivers, there's 43,000+ of you in the state. All right? You have a right to be here. You are legal, and you've been doing this for 10 years. Don't let somebody tell you that you're somehow inferior to somebody who paid a license fee. Okay? Because just because they paid a license fee doesn't mean they know what they're doing. It just means they got money. All right? And guys like this apparently don't have enough because he's worried about you cutting into his business. All right? This kind of stuff, it enrages me. It makes me sick. And I just wish people like that would fall off the face of the earth. I mean, good grief. Get real. So, anyways, I wanted to share that with you. I think it's important that we know what's going on with our business, with our industry. I mean, patients need caregivers. Caregivers can do things that a licensed facility is never going to be able to do. And, the need for them is never going to go away. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to develop. I think we need to pay attention to our legislature. We need to pay attention, obviously, to these lobbyist groups out there as they continue to represent their interest. And I think most of all, we need to stick up for our own rights, whether that be rights as a patient or rights as a caregiver. I mean, you have a right to abide by the law, to take advantage of the law, just like they do. I think you should be able to fully utilize that. And of course, obviously, we need to make sure that our products are up to standard and something that isn't going to make somebody sick at the end of the day. So, anyways, that's the news. That's what I want to share with you. I appreciate you guys being with me this week. I hope you can try to stay warm. Watch out for the ice out there. It's nasty. But most importantly, get down to the club, all right? I want to see you guys down there. Got our 10-year anniversary party coming up next week. It's going to be awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys there. It's going to be fantastic, all right? So thanks for being with me this week. John, thanks for being here with me also. All Points TV, make sure you check out their other podcasts if you can, allpointstv.com. Got good stuff on here. And get down to the club, all right? We'll see you guys soon. Take care. Love you. Peace.